Hi Rockstars, I'm Aly, your Rockstar Bar Girl, and welcome to the Rockstar Bar Girl Tip of the Week.
I'm a rock star. Every day I rock hard. I'm a motherfucking rock star. Every day I rock hard. I'm a rock star.
Hi Rockstars, I'm Aly, your Rockstar Bar Girl, and this week's Tip of the Week is all about properly checking ID. It's one of the most important things that you will do as a bartender. So right up there with making sure that you responsibly serve alcohol and don't overserve anyone is making sure that everyone that you serve alcohol to is of age and is legal to drink. In most states, the age to serve alcohol and the age to purchase or consume alcohol are different. Using New York, my state, as an example, in New York you have to be 18 years old to serve alcohol, so you can become a bartender at 18, but it's actually not legal for you to purchase or consume alcohol until you are 21. And I do believe that 21 is the legal drinking age throughout the country. Failing to check ID and serving someone who's underage can bring a world of hurt down on your bar. If you are investigated or raided, as it's called, either by the police department or by your local liquor board, your bar could be not just fined, but flat out shut down. And you, the individual bartender, could have some issues as well, particularly if that person left your bar intoxicated and either hurt themselves or someone else. So it's really critical that no matter what, you take checking ID super seriously, and you make sure to do it every time where it's necessary. I want to give a super special word of caution to all of you underage bartenders out there. It is very difficult to be an underage bartender. Not only are you going to get attitudes from people who maybe don't appreciate you checking their ID in the first place, but your friends are very likely to want to use you as their hookup. So I know the temptation is there. I know it's going to be really difficult to tell your friends, sorry, you can't come to my bar, but you're going to have to do it, because if they consume alcohol on premise and you served it to them, and then they leave your bar and do anything illegal or dangerous, you could find yourself personally liable. So your bar might get into trouble, but you yourself might be personally liable. So in this video, I'm going to go through exactly how you properly check ID, and then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, I guess you could call it, about what checking ID is like in the real world. So there are 5 steps to properly checking identification. Step number 1 is to do it. A lot of times when people are caught drinking underage in a bar, it's not because they had a great fake ID. It's simply because the bartender failed to ask. So it's really important that you do it. You're gonna have some jitters when you first start bartending, because it's a little bit of a weird thing, an imposing thing to ask somebody to hand over their identification, but don't let those nerves keep you from asking in the first place. So who do you ask? Some bars will have a stated policy for who should be carded. Some bars will say things like everyone at the bar should be carded. And I don't like those types of policies because they're totally unrealistic. Especially the busier it gets and things like that, you are just less and less likely to be checking ID from every single person that comes to the bar. So I don't really like that type of a policy. Not because it's a bad policy, mostly just because it's rarely adhered to. The age-based policy is a much better policy. So if your bar doesn't have one already written or that's established, I would set one for myself, and I would make it 30 years old. So anyone who looks like they're under 30 years old should get carded. If you have that established policy, either formally through the bar or just for yourself, then you want to stick to that just to the T, okay? Don't make exceptions to your own rule, because I promise the one time you say to yourself, nah, they're like 28, but I'm sure they're fine, is gonna be the one time that 18-year-old just looks really old. So apply that policy across the board. So this is the one time as a bartender you are absolutely entitled to stand your ground no matter what, and no one can say that you're not giving good customer service. It's literally a part of your customer service to make sure that you are safely serving the alcohol that you've been entrusted to work with. People inevitably are going to get attitude with you. Sometimes it'll be because they're underage and they don't have ID and they know it. Sometimes it'll be because they are of age and they're for some reason offended that you asked. Either way, you are doing the right thing. I never encourage getting an attitude back with the guest or arguing with them back and forth. This is a matter of health and safety, and it's a legal requirement on both of our parts. So there really is no conversation to be had. So whenever I get kickback from somebody about me asking for ID, they simply get the blank face. We'll stand here like this all night. I'm not going to explain myself to you. I simply stated the policy that if you appear to be under 30, I must check your ID. And until you give me the ID, nothing's going to happen for you. No drink is going to be made, no order is going to be taken, and everybody else at the bar is just going to get increasingly annoyed with you for sitting there and wasting everyone's time. So either you give me the ID or you walk away. And until you do, step number 2 is to physically handle the ID. So sometimes people will have an ID in a plastic part of their wallet or behind some type of a screen. They need to take that ID out. It's important that you physically handle the ID because that is where you are going to find signs of the ID not actually being a valid government-issued document. When you physically handle the ID, you are looking for a couple of things. So first of all, you're looking for it to be the wrong material. Every ID by every state is actually a hard plastic card. Gone are the days where government-issued state IDs are pieces of paper that have been laminated. In some places that is how they used to be, but I don't think that's the case anywhere anymore. Which means it's not going to be coming apart or able to be peeled apart front to back. It should just be one solid piece of plastic, so you should never be able to pull it apart. Another thing you want to look for are missing holographs. A lot of states will have a portion of the ID that has a reflective hologram part of it. It's usually the part of the ID that has the picture of the state or the picture of the state's flag emblem. If the ID is missing that hologram, then there's a problem with that ID and it's probably not valid. And then finally, every once in a while, you'll get someone who makes a really bad fake ID, and they'll totally throw off the orientation of that ID. Not every ID is oriented like landscape orientation with everything running left to right. Some IDs are oriented portrait style with everything kind of running underneath the picture and state information. So some bars and restaurants will have a book behind the bar that has a picture of what a standard ID in every state looks like so that you can check that orientation. Obviously, if it's your state and you know how it should be oriented, if it's wrong, then it should be pretty easy for you to determine that. But if you have any questions and you don't have a state ID guidebook behind the bar, then go and speak with the manager. So step 3 in properly checking ID is obviously the most important part, checking the birth date of the individual on the ID. So today is September 6th, 2019. If I'm checking ID today, I am looking for a birth date that is either on or before September 6th, 1998. Yeah, so on or before today's date, 1998. So that means if the birth date is March 12th, 1998, that person's good to go. They turned 21 this year in March. If it's September 6th, 1998, congratulations, today's your birthday. You are 21 and you can start killing yourself with alcohol. If the birth date is November 2nd, 1998, that person is not 21 yet. They will be in November, and so it's really important that you look at the entire birth date and not just the year. Now, once you've checked the quality of the ID, you're sure that it's a valid ID, and you've checked the date and confirmed that that person is 21, we have a tendency to stop there. I've made this mistake. I know every single bartender on the face of the earth has made this mistake. You take a look at the ID, you zero in right on the date, and you hand it back to the person. And that's oftentimes really where you can get yourself in trouble. A person who has borrowed someone else's ID has gone to the lengths of finding somebody who looks a lot like them. But chances are they're not identical. So you want to look at the picture on the ID and then look at the person, look at the picture, look at the person, and be sure that you're looking at the same person. You also want to look at those descriptors underneath the picture, things like eye color and height, to help you determine if you are in fact looking at the right person. Sometimes people don't borrow other people's IDs, they actually go out and get a fake ID made for themselves, in which case the photo and the descriptor information is going to be accurate because it's a picture of them and it's information about them. But sometimes you're just gonna feel it, you're just gonna kind of know that even though this ID looks like the person you're talking to, the descriptors are accurate, the birth date says they're 21, you just feel strongly that you're dealing with somebody who is not of age. Don't give up there. Step number 5 in checking ID is to ask as many follow-up questions as you need to feel comfortable that the person that you're about to serve is of legal drinking age and that this is in fact their ID. So you want to avoid follow-up questions about the information on the ID, because whether it's borrowed or it was made for that person, chances are the person was at least smart enough to memorize everything on the card. Instead, you want to ask them sort of ancillary information about the ID. So something like, what's your sign, is a common follow-up question. Another common follow-up question is, what high school did you go to? The thing about asking these follow-up questions is you don't have to actually know the answer to them yourself. What you're looking for is a real struggle or an inability on the part of the person to answer those questions. Because if it's your ID, then it should be really quick for you to respond with what your sign is. It should be really quick for you to respond with what high school you went to. The casualness and the ease with which that person answers that question is going to tell you a lot about the validity of the information on the ID. When someone gets nervous, they stop making eye contact, or they have to really stop and think, that's a really good sign that something's not quite right, and that's when you want to stop and get your manager. So there are a couple of sort of words of caution or words of wisdom that I want to give you about checking ID in the real world. So the first word of caution is to never ever rely on your security. Security guards are humans too. They make mistakes. And no offense to you security guards out there, take your jobs really, really seriously. But it is unfortunately really common for security guards to let underage females into bars because they're cute, and to let underage males into bars because they paid them some money. And yes, they'll give you an attitude because security checked at the door. It doesn't matter. Remember the blank face? If you have any doubt that someone in your bar is of legal drinking age, ask them for ID and check it yourself. Another word of wisdom is to beware of multiple orders. A lot of times what will happen is people who are underage will be going out in groups of people that are of age. And so people who are of age will go to the bar and get carded and purchase drinks and then go back to the table or the area where everyone is hanging out with the drink that they purchased for the underage individual. This gets harder to monitor the busier and more crowded your bar is, but in circumstances where it's not too crowded and you can see that a table of 4 or 5 people is sitting down and maybe only 2 people come up to the bar and order drinks, it's a really good idea to ask everyone to come to the bar and show their IDs. And my final word of wisdom is about what to do with that ID when you have determined that it is in fact fraudulent. Some bars or restaurants will have a policy in-house about what to do with it, and in that case you should follow your bar or restaurant's policy. But if there isn't a policy in place, I highly recommend that you confiscate but do not destroy that ID. It's totally fine to not return the ID to the person and to instead go and hand it over to a manager. The manager can decide if they are going to give it back to the individual once they've escorted that person out of the bar. Even if it's a terrible fake that's peeling apart at the corners, you want to hang on to that because that actually could be evidence if anything happens with that person and the police need to retrace their steps and find out how they got into your bar in the first place, where they were before, and things of that nature. Okay, rock stars, so those are the steps to checking ID and my words of wisdom for checking ID in the real world. If you found this video helpful or just liked it, make sure to give me a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, leave them for me down below. And of course, subscribe. Click on the bell button to be notified every time a new video comes out. Follow me on Instagram at rockstar_bargirl, and please check out my website, therockstarbargirl.com. I've got free videos, a Rockstar bar kit, which is a 16-piece custom bar tool kit that I know you're gonna love, and a full online course for those of you looking to become bartenders. So as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, Rockstars.
Rockstar.